Thank you very much, Magdalena. And so what we will do is we have a fairly short session, about 45 minutes. And the light is just horrible here. I can't see you, but I hope that if you have any point to raise, you shout or you wave or whatever, you can interrupt this discussion. So what we will do is we talk about countering AI-powered threats. So this is about AI and cybersecurity. Let me just give a brief introduction, and then we have some questions to the speakers. And we thought actually discussing a little bit with the speakers, it may actually also be good to clarify a little bit what is it that we are talking about? What kind of AI and cybersecurity are we seeing today? So if you read up on the literature, if you see what's happening on the internet and in the business world, you see that AI and cybersecurity is really growing. People are doing data analytics, data that is coming massively from sensors or from people's behavior. They use machine learning. They use it for decision support so that you know if you have a huge set of assets, how do you manage those, rapid reaction, adaptive response, that type of AI. I have read about AI that might be used for software analysis, for code analysis. And then, of course, you also read and hear and talk to people, you hear about AI that is used for weapons, either pure cyber weapons or cyberkinetic weapons, of which there is a form which is called lethal autonomous weapons laws. That is one variation of that. So that's all using AI in combination with systems. What you also have in itself is the cybersecurity of AI in itself. You know, how do you protect AI, for example, in an autonomous self-driving car? How do you protect that to be hacked? So that's one side, is the technological side. The other side is more the policy and the business and economic side. Things like how do you securely design AI, but also AI in a broader sense where there's a lot of talk about it. So there are loads of these kind of AI charters, and some of them, or actually all of them, assume that AI should be used in a lawful, ethical, and a robust way. And if you say ethical, then these policies include respect for human autonomy, preventing harm, being fair, and being explainable. And then, as you have probably also read in the background to this, one of these policy developments is also happening in Europe. There's a high-level group by the European Commission that has issued a set of guidelines for trustworthy AI. So we'll talk about technology, we'll talk about what type of AI and what type of policy. So let me go to the panel. So first, let's talk a little bit about the kind of what you might say the good use of AI, the AI for in cybersecurity to defend, protect, prevent harm in our systems. The AI for the good. So perhaps we hear of some actual cases, people who want to, perhaps Tom, you want to start to give some examples of how are people working with AI today? And Ludmila perhaps also has some from your business environment. Ladies first, Ludmila, perhaps you start first.
Thank you very much. Thank you also very much for the invitation today. It's a very interesting, great panel, and it's great to be here, also here in Katowice.
Ludmila, say perhaps also something about the role that you do. That
so maybe a bit, okay, so I always say, so really dealing with government affairs and public policy. I have a background in privacy and cybersecurity, a very heavy background in privacy and cybersecurity. Was in the public sector before, dealing with cybersecurity and GDPR. So, and joined like 10 months ago, Google, being, as I said, a hardcore lobbyist. But I'm also doing a lot of stuff and a lot of on the question of cybersecurity and privacy and all, law enforcement access.
So some of the examples of AI in cybersecurity.
For cyber, so AI for good, there is a lot of examples going really towards also like how you can help and support the everyday life, prevent floods and all this stuff. But I think in particular to cybersecurity, there we have, we use a lot of machine learning, I would say, in that sense, especially, for example, in Google Play, we have the Google Play Protect. It protects like every day about 3 billion Android devices, where, for example, machine learning is used to train to be trained in that sense to detect potentially harmful apps. So basically, they're comparing the safe apps, which we categorize with and use to detect patterns, and the signals which are coming from anonymized data, and to detect the potential harmful apps. We also use machine learning, or in broader sense, AI, as AI has a lot of sets. Also for phishing email, for protecting in Gmail, for detecting fraud, in Android also for detecting malicious behavior in a broader sense. So I think there is a really, most of our products are using actually AI in that sense that we teach them to detect patterns.
Yeah. Tom?
Thank you. Well, I'm Tom Cutchin, and my background is technical, the more formal side of security, more in sort of cryptography and dependability, but the two come together. But for the past 10 years, I've been working more on interaction between humans and machines, which is fun. You should try it.
Mm-hmm.
So within defence, we're at quite an early stage in the use of AI. When it comes to actual cyber defence, we tend to rely still on classical mechanisms, making sure everything is ship-shape, that all the reps are applied, etc., and it's hard to attack us, make our firewalls good. Where we do use a limited amount of AI, or I suppose more technically machine learning, is in detecting attack patterns. Do these attack patterns look like those attack patterns? What should we do about it? Etc., etc. We're not yet sophisticated enough to say it was that person there, but sometimes we do get a fairly shrewd idea.
Mm-hmm. Peter, and actually Google is of course a great company, but you've got a very great company in the Czech Republic, Avast, which is really into this business. What about that?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, actually. So my name is Petročka. I'm Deputy Minister for Digitalization and Innovation at the Czech Ministry of Industry and Trade, so responsible for many things like 5G, electronic communications, digital agenda, not e-government, but some of the topics related also to research in like transformative technologies, including AI. And of course, if we speak about digitalization, we should always speak about cybersecurity, that's for sure. And coming back to your question, of course, Czech Republic, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but you are right that there are actually at least two cybersecurity clusters in Czech Republic. One is in Brno, it's like very much university city, and the second one is Prague. And of course, Avast, if I would name one like unicorn company from Czech Republic in the last 25 years, it's of course Avast. It's like a global company, and we are lucky to have Avast in Czech Republic, and now we have quite a broad ecosystem of small companies, startups around Avast, and but also some like competitor companies, and we had a few successful startups that were bought by like major companies like Cisco in the area of cybersecurity. So definitely this is a very important topic for the Czech Republic. So maybe we can discuss it later on. What are the main parameters for setting the ecosystem to build real like cybersecurity clusters and utilize their outputs for national security. Actually, Czech Republic is actually more or less sixth most safe country in the world, and in the last IMD digital ranking, actually Czech Republic was sixth in the level of cybersecurity. So it's not only about Avast, but it's also that thanks to the community that is actually growing in cybersecurity, that we have very, I would say, advanced legislation in cybersecurity, and also a very well working cybersecurity office in UKIP. So it's now, I would say, that Czech Republic, the cybersecurity ecosystem works very well.
Yeah. So you would say that's not only AI used in cybersecurity for itself in a positive sense, but it's also economically it's quite positive that you have that.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
obvious.
Yeah, okay, yes, that's true. Definitely, like it's it's now one of the, I would say, very important sectors of Czech economy. So yeah, we try to support it, and of course, like of course, I didn't mention in relation to AI, but it's very much related to AI, and we could definitely find several levels of relation to AI. Of course, we have AI in cybersecurity, like detection of malware and anomalies and so on. Then we have like topic of safe or / resilient AI or trustworthy AI. But then we have also topic of AI for safety and security. How AI can help in like face recognition for like police purposes and so on and so on. Of course, so there are several levels of interconnection of AI and security / cybersecurity.
Yeah. Merle, from your side, what are you running into in the sense of good AI?
Well, hi, and as a way of introduction on my side, really great and happy to be here and impressed by the whole setup of the organization. I'm Merle Maigrä, coming from Estonia, from a small Estonian cybersecurity company called Cybersec Technologies, but my approach to the whole topic comes from a strategic perspective. I interacted with autonomy, machine learning, and AI first and mostly in my previous job as the director of the NATO Cyber Center of Excellence in Tallinn. And amongst others, the center is still putting out pretty good papers on the legal aspects of AI, for example. But complementing on what you've said, and indeed, I see AI or autonomy or machine learning being used in various cyber defense activities. Perhaps it's worthwhile to mention the most famous use of autonomous cyber capabilities, that is during the DARPA cyber challenge in 2016 and the Mayhem cyber reasoning system that won the challenge, whereby the autonomous systems without any ongoing human input first had to protect their software from adversaries by finding and patching vulnerabilities, then maintaining the softwares that they are available and functional, efficient, and finally they needed to exploit vulnerabilities in their adversary software. So that's where you have the autonomous cyber capabilities actually acting in a form that is called in the defense sector the active defense. Yep. The line, of course, between active and passive cyber defense is very, very thin, just as you have a very thin line between the offensive and defensive in real defense sector.
Yeah, but that's certainly an interesting example. We'll come back to that, to this autonomously operating AI. Sebor, from your side, what would you say? Perhaps also briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you. Petr mentioned about Cisco. I am from Cisco and 6 years already responsible for security, both on the infrastructure part and more advisory part. And it's not a coincidence that Pat mentioned the significant development that is happening in Czech Republic, where Cisco has operations, where we actually drive the cognitive threat analytics team in Prague. And that's actually this positive part of utilizing and leveraging AI. I'd rather call it machine learning because these are the algorithms where we teach and leverage. This is for the detection and probably one of the most impactful in the recent 3-4 years, implementation of detecting malware in an encrypted traffic. Nobody has done this before. We programmed in a very particular way the capability for our devices, for the network devices, to discover the traffic that is malware already, not the attack, but the malware itself by specific patterns. And I call it, this is a really a huge achievement from perspective of making a better resiliency for the network itself. The second thing is, there are, though, vulnerabilities that we know are somehow preventing themselves from being detected. And that is also AI behind, which is concurring what we are trying to achieve, and probably you will follow up on that later. We are there too, and this is a significant, I think, the joint effort that should happen among the companies, public sector, to actually define a new way of how to leverage AI for the new threats that are coming or they are already at the door.
Like what kind of new threats?
So it's very soft, in fact. When you look into the darknet, into whatever not visible for us, like a standard or I would say default user, one of the most important element is to define scenario for the attack. Someone who is inventing, I'm saying someone, it might be actually AI, someone who is inventing a scenario-based attack, that is the 50% job done. And that is something which is being the mostly hidden part of the entire, campaign.
So is this people who are themselves then using AI again to do an attack?
This is my opinion, which I believe many people may not actually agree, that this is where human race have a still advantage on the artificial intelligence, where we using our brains, where we using our diversity, can still defend ourselves. But once this singularity comes, who knows what happens?
That's an interesting one. So you're thinking that the humans can do the bad part and the AI can do the good part?
There are people who are doing bad part,
They are.
and there are people who are doing good part.
Yep.
I think we are in this good part, are we?
But perhaps we continue on that point, because it's actually about AI is also being exploited by people who want to do bad, isn't it? And so, Lumila, for example, what are you seeing that people are starting to do, using AI in a malicious way?
So maybe it's a very interesting topic because maybe a disclaimer, we believe really in Google that technology is actually where I would say optimists, we're technological optimists, and we really believe that technology actually should support humans and everyday life. So, and technology is neither bad nor good, it's neutral. So the question is how the ethical deployment of technology, in that sense AI. I think there is like great examples of how AI can help our life, how can protect, how we can use it in different detection of malware or threat or fraud. But of course, people also using technology for bad purposes. A computer is also can be used for good or bad. And in that sense, I mean, you can have the data poisoning, you have the adversarial examples, or also the question of recovery of sensitive training data.
Explain a little bit, what is data poisoning?
It's kind of like, so maybe I'll concentrate a bit on the adversarial examples, where we do a lot of research. And I really recommend, sorry for the little advertisement for Google, but ai.google, very short. So you can find a lot of like what we're doing, what we're trying to explore with best practices, especially on how to explore and how to reverse. We do a lot of trainings in that sense on adversarial examples. So we have, it's called, I have just to look at 1 second. It's called, I always forget it's called Clever Hans. Clever Hans is an open source machine learning a security research library. So we do a lot of, in this sense, to explain, to detect, but also to provide here solutions for an open source. So maybe Cisco want to...
Lumila, isn't there a certain risk also in that? That, I mean, I think Google is indeed great in making all of these kind of tools available, but they are also being made very easily available for criminals, for criminal use.
But this is kind of, I'm a lawyer, so for me, criminal behavior is a criminal behavior. It doesn't matter what kind of tools you use. So the tools, the more advanced we become, the more advanced are the tools, and we have just to keep up with this technology. The cybersecurity is not a kind of an end statement. It's a process.
Yeah.
You always have.
So may I ask, does the panel actually agree with that? So there is a recent case. OpenAI had developed a piece of AI that they actually did not want to publish because you could very easily produce fake news, convincing fake news text, and they said no, we are not going to publish that. You may of course wonder how long can they keep that up, but isn't there a certain responsibility in companies perhaps not to publish certain
There is
technology?
so what we learned, and we're learning, I think everybody around the world is learning how to use and to deploy AI. What we are learning, we're trying to put in principles. So we have developed 7 AI principles, how to use and in which way to use AI. Then 6 months later, we learned there is also, again, we updated it and we found out that there are applications where we do not want to use AI, for example. So this is kind of the way you work. It's step by step. It's learning, and of course, AI, as it said, it's a technique, it's a technology, and you can either use it for good or for bad. And the moment we realize that something, but you can never prevent. You can try to preempt all the consequences of a technology, but there are always some stuff you haven't thought about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then, of course, you have to say, "Oh, sorry," we then go back. But I think you also not to publish some AI sets means because they might be used for in a harmful way, which nobody wants to. So again, ethical deployment, principles, ethical behavior.
Yeah,
This
we
is
will
really-
we will get to that still in a minute. Merle, do you see that, let's say, there is bad use of AI that is either now or at the horizon that really should worry us?
Well, what I'm worried less about AI, so to say, or the machine learning in the hands of bad people, putting it very simply, because ultimately, or yes, it is a worry, but it's always been a worry. I mean, anything starting from very conventional weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, or ingredients of thereof can get into the wrong hands, and certainly we have to carefully be intelligently able to discuss about this and set limits to it. But where I see possibly also AI, so to say, go rogue or unintended consequences of autonomous weapon systems, if you want, or autonomy in general, happening can be in hackbacks, for example. Hackback, basically, by hackback I mean automatic autonomous hackbacks, whereby that would mean a software that would, without real-time human intervention, to identify, detect an origin, identify its origins, and then go out of its own system to stop it. And the question there is, that raises concern, is attribution. Because attribution, according to that system, the autonomous system does only technical attribution. But this is where I strongly believe, in order to mitigate the risk of technical attribution being wrong, just because of spoofing and other various sophisticated techniques that can happen, attribution cannot be only technical. It needs to have other dimensions added up, and ultimately it is a political decision. In addition to the technical attribution, you need to have the overall geopolitical, the intelligence data, geopolitical context, and ultimately a political decision. So I see this being within the state's responsibility, and taking political risks that you can have with hackbacks is something that states can have. So it's, for me, not so much the concern of AI getting in the hands of wrong people, but rather where do you limit autonomous cyber capabilities, and where do you have states take some responsibility?
Yeah, talking about that autonomy, perhaps I want to go to Tom here. I mean, if you have good AI that's used for defensive purposes, there may also be an unintended bad consequence to it, that it takes away the autonomy of the human operator. So when there is an incident, you actually should really assess, and Merle is, I think, pointing into that direction, do you do the attribution right, but also what is actually happening. But incidents can go at an extremely fast scale. According to some reports, there's half a trillion attacks on the stock market every day. About 30 to 40 of that are of real significance or are really potentially damaging. You can only have AI to deal with that. But wouldn't that lead to people kind of leaning back and saying, well, the system should solve it, because it's the automatic system, the AI, that will take the decision. As a human, you cannot keep up. And isn't that a risk for autonomy?
It's a good point. It's a good point, actually. I suppose as you go quite a bit down line, a human intervention to protect your system will become irrelevant because the sophistication and speed of the attacks and the evolvability of the attacks will be such that a human can't keep up with it. So you'll have to devolve it to the machine. So then you have to constrain the machine. So if you're attacked, you can perhaps spot the structure of the attack using AI. You can then dynamically remodel your defenses if need be using AI. And if the worst comes to the worst, you can selectively degrade your networks if you're actually harmed using AI. And that takes you very firmly into ethical issues. Because if you're downgrading your networks, and it's a transport network, a health network, supplying power to the city network, who gets the power, who doesn't? Oops. So that's very, very special territory. I think, however, the one thing that must not be done is you mustn't allow the AI to reach back and stop the attack at source. Because it's relatively easy to attack a network. It's very, very easy to obfuscate your attack on the network. And you could very quickly find yourself in a rapidly escalating cycle of violence. Your AI reaches back and somebody else's AI reaches back, etc. So I think you have to have very strict delineations. If you wish to go beyond that, then you're into state-on-state actions. And that's a very different thing.
Yeah. So that brings us actually already firmly, we already started talking about it, of what can you do in terms of policy in order to countering AI-powered threats. So, Merle, how do you look at these ethical frameworks that are emerging? What's your view on that? Does that help in particular then we are talking about AI and cybersecurity? Most of the ethical frameworks are pretty broad. But what about, would they be taken seriously? Can they have a serious effect in the field of AI and cybersecurity?
Well, I think if they're done intelligently, then they are taken seriously. Where I very much align with Ludmila saying that, well, where I don't buy in is this blind stop the killer robots campaigns, because I can only echo what you said. There is no bad or good technology, but technology, the usefulness of the technology depends on in whose hands it is. But surely I think there is not enough finances and resources invested into the study of ethics of AI and into the nuanced problem sets that you outlined at times of crisis, at times of dependence on critical information infrastructure. To what extent can we allow machines do decisions instead of us, and to what extent can we at all have a human in the loop or on the loop? I mean, we love to have it in 3 degrees, human in the loop, in overall manual control. Very often this seems to be out of the question. Then human on the loop, so as sort of a control position, and then human out of the loop. Surely humans out of the loop currently is not another question for the Western military establishments, for example. The question is to what extent can you nuance the human on the loop itself? I mean, it's not black and white.
Yeah. So that whole question about ethics, of course, also has a lot to do. Well, that has obviously a lot to do with the values that you subscribe to, which are not uniform across the world. I mean, so are these ethical approaches only possible with, let's say, like-minded parties, or are we actually talking here about AI and cybersecurity being perhaps such a risky combination that we need to really try to find common grounds with states across the world? And is that feasible? Actually, perhaps, Peter, you had this also interesting, quite political discussion on a somewhat different topic, 5G security, but nevertheless, there you're talking a little bit about the same. Are we working just within a group of friends, or are we trying to achieve something which has a global value? So take the example of nuclear technology. I think it's generally accepted that it would be quite risky if that gets in the hand of rogue groups, and that's accepted across the world, even if we may be having opposition on how ultimately nuclear technology is being used between states. So how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. Actually, if I follow what was said by Merle, It's definitely, if we speak about AI and security, we definitely cannot speak only about technical aspects. We need to speak about non-technical and contextual aspects of the systems that are actually being developed. And we need to speak about ethics. And if we speak about ethics, we need to speak about values. If we speak about values, we know that the world, some countries in the world do not share the same values. Okay, then we come to the fact that probably it's not so much compatible. It's not the same as setting the standard for, I don't know, like smartphones. Actually, smartphones are already AI powered by. But if we speak about any industrial standard, but now we speak about values that are actually need to be incorporated in the thinking how we develop these new systems. So I think this is very important. I'm very happy that here in Europe we can see a lot of efforts to work on like a set of values and ethical guidelines. So especially I speak about ethical guidelines for AI that were published in the spring, and that were actually prepared by the Helva Group for AI. And this is, I think, this is very good achievement. This is good basis for the further development of really ethical AI, and I hope we can export it from Europe. This is something that is big asset, and now it's being piloted. We will see. In Czech Republic, we actually have quite nice strategy. I have one print copy here. So of course also electronic available. This is the ethical standards and like social aspects of AI is one of the key priorities, and we definitely intend to increase investments into research into this area, and it's already being invested now. So actually, I think. For your question, if we share the same values, no, and of course, if we do not share the same values and we have technologies based on different values, then definitely we need to deal with the question how we will communicate with the rest of the world.
So let's look at people that are communicating with the rest of the world from the companies. So you are global companies, and nevertheless you apply certain kind of thinking around ethical AI in relation to the security also of the systems that you sell. So how do you deal with that when you are cooperating with people that may be on a somewhat different page?
We don't like them, do we?
But you might still be selling to them, isn't it?
Well, that is true. And actually, it's a fascinating element about why we are talking about it is the affordability. The affordability of AI on machine learning is for everybody. While when we are talking about the nuclear weapon, that's not for everybody, that is for the state actors. And I think that's where we have a problem with the scale. It's really hard to determine from which direction we may get hit, either using the AI power or leveraging this by the bad actors. So we detect through the intelligence around 2 billion attacks every day in the core network of internet. That's a fact. And as you said, we couldn't do it without having some sophisticated mechanism to detect it. But do we detect everything? Absolutely not. Because the variations and the evolution of these scenarios, the patterns, this is going so fast that probably we will be at the edge. We are probably at the edge already with the detection mechanism. And this is right now a very significant discussion about whether, for example, encryption is going to help us to detect or it's going to be contrary. Sometimes when we want to provide additional security level for protecting, for example, our intellectual property, this is in fact going against the priorities of detection because we put the high-level encryption. And there is not a simple answer on that, unfortunately.
And if you are having in the company AI that can be used, that's very good AI, that can be used for various purposes, but it might also be used for a bad purpose, would you then not sell it to that actor? Or would you say, I sell, and it's their responsibility?
This is definitely ethical discussion.
So take, for example, facial recognition for mass surveillance, you would not sell that. I think Google said something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have, maybe to facial recognition, we have a specific position on this where there is no general facial recognition what we're doing. So there is, if we use facial recognition for specific, very targeted purposes. But coming back to your question before, and I'm happy that the politician spoke before the private company. So I think it's a lot of, when you come down to, that's why we started to work with the AI principles and the application, where to not to use AI or where to use, and when we have to take kind of a decision, a business decision, we do apply these principles and say, do this fits or not? It's a very simple, it's a bit of mathematics. So as you see, we're an engineering company, a lot of mathematics in our thinking. But what Merle said also, it's about intelligent, I would say smart regulation. And the question of, it has to be principle-based. I will just give an example, not because I was part of the negotiations, but GDPR is this kind of a principle-based, technologically neutral regulation where you can use it even for AI. So in order to say how to deal with it, how to process, how to protect it. And I think this is something that we have when we talk about regulation, values. This is something that it's, as a lawyer and working in an engineering company, I come back to law and technological break it down that makes the political decision easier. We have cyber norms which are actually, or we have international norms which are actually well recepted. We have them, they should just apply in cyberspace. I think this is like to make this kind of a level, but also like human rights. They are actually internationally acknowledged, and this is the moment where we say what it happens in analog life should happen in digital, and so vice versa. But also, as I said, smart regulation, and again, because you asked for policy recommendations, we did in our white paper on 20 pages, like exactly saying, if you want to do a AI regulation, think about the governance, think about the ethical use, think about actually not AI in general, because you cannot tackle this. It's actually, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. You have basically to think about sectoral approaches and where you need for, which is more risky or not. And again, this risk-based approach, which is also part of the GDPR, not describing a technology, and AI is a way of technology. So.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's very insightful. I mean, that also brings it to something like, what is it that you actually want to do with regulation? We can talk a little bit more about that, but perhaps, as you already just said, there is this charter of for the high-level group on AI and ethics, and the incoming president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has announced that within 100 days of her mandate, she would come with regulation in the field of AI. So an interesting question is, of course, you know, AI is, of course, very young. There's still so much developing. Isn't it a bit too early to come with regulation? On the other hand, some people might say, well, you know, if you let it happen, we might get into the situation that you never can turn back anymore. And some other people would say, well, therefore, right now you need to do it, or we are already too late. So actually, I would be interested in the view of the audience. If we talk about AI regulation, is it too early to come with AI regulation, AI laws? Is it too late, or is it the right time? Now, it's very difficult for me to see the audience, so let me do it this way. If you say, we do it like in the British Parliament, the ayes and the noes. I should first say order, but if we do it that way. So, who thinks it's too early? You shout aye. Too early. I hear a few ayes. Too late. No ayes. The right time. Aye. Very unrepresentative poll. I think for people with a mathematical background, this doesn't hold at all. But at least it gives us an idea. So if you talk about AI regulation is one thing, but there's more to it. There's also actually for good AI or for the good use of AI, something like an industrial policy to it. Peter, what can we do if we had just a debate that people said, you know, if you want to have your strategic autonomy, there are certain things that you need to really do here in Europe, and otherwise you're lost, you're dependent. But that means a piece of industrial policy. So what can we do?
Yes, I think it's you can read it in the agenda of Ursula von der Leyen that you have mentioned that actually industrial policy is not a bad word for European Union again, so that's good. And of course, it has to be like industrial policy for the 21st century, so it has to be based on digital technologies, including AI, and actually. In my opinion, actually, maybe coming back to your small poll, actually, what I think is that it's the right time to start with the regulation, and of course, and I fully agree what was said, and I like GDPR. Actually, I think this is one of the things we can export again from European Union. I think so, and can be extended for new technologies that are coming. So something. It's not that we are in the 0.0 at this moment, but we should be careful because actually we don't know so much what will happen, and I'm fully convinced that we need to invest what I have said into like deep research, what's actually going on, what will happen, and then to come with some robust regulation. It's not to say that we shouldn't do anything now, but if I read this what you have said, 100 days for AI regulation that I also read in agenda for Ursula von der Leyen. Okay, I agree that we should work on this, but I'm a little bit scared, and like Czech Republic is usually this country that was actually close to UK in saying let's not over-regulate, let's not start with the regulation. Yep. Let's analyze, let's see what works, and then come with regulation that, of course, protects human rights and the values of EU and Europe. That I fully agree, but doesn't jeopardize business. That's because I'm from Minister of Industry, so I'm of course a little bit defending in terms of business. And so if we speak about industrial policy, then actually I think industrial policy is necessary. It has to be industrial policy that is actually powered by new technologies, and in the terms of regulation, we should also think about not to undermine the pillars of European economy.
Yeah. So let's. I mean, we need to time-wise start wrapping up this panel. So you already gave a clear recommendation. Yes, regulate, but you probably need to be pretty careful and keep flexibility. So don't do something that will actually impede also progress, which will be a hard call to do that, but okay, that's a clear advice. But let's go into your recommendations on how to move ahead in countering AI-powered threats, either in the debate or actually in actual policy making. Tom, what is your recommendation?
Sure. I would build on what's just been said. We've been presented today repeatedly with a dichotomy between free market-led, typical US, and state-led, typically China. And there's a huge space in the middle which has not been addressed, and that's for trustworthy, dependable artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that Europe excels at. And I think if we really seize that market and build it as our own, then we don't have to worry so much because we'll be part of the main picture.
You've got a good brand already. Trustworthy AI, come here. It's from Europe.
We do it with everything else. Why not AI?
Great.
I can just echo. I think Europe has been also, and we're very supportive in all this valuable and values. And also what Europe is very strong about is about industry. And I think here is also, when you think about AI, it's always about bias. Mm-hmm. And I think here exactly what Europe has, this kind of a values and non-discriminatory approach, actually is very supportive. You do not need a massive or a lot of, if you have only one type of data, it doesn't help you for AI because it doesn't, it's biased. So it won't be actually helpful. So I think here is Europe and can lead by example. And as I said, and I can echo only better that there is already quite a lot of existing political and legal frameworks. Mm-hmm. And I think also Merle mentioned this, where we have to work to make it interoperable.
Okay, good.
So, and think about the SMEs.
Thank you. I'm watching time a little bit. Sebor.
So just very shortly about from the industry perspective, engineering perspective, I think the general rule and like a blueprints, best practices like a service by design, plus innovation behind. That, in my opinion, is the best way and the best approach
Yeah,
that we
spelling out.
continue. But we need to still monitor what's going on with the use of AI.
Okay. Merle, for you, the last recommendation here.
Well, I think what we see is something very typical. We see policymakers and political decision makers playing catch up with the technology, and of course the danger is that the decision makers do not understand the technical details. But it's important for them to maintain that in order to regulate this. It's not important to understand everything, but it's important to understand enough to assess the impact of your decisions on the way our societies function and the national and international security functions.
Yeah.
So that starts from asking the right questions, as well as I said before, investing into serious cooperation in research about the impact of AI on ethics, safety, and equality or societal impact.
So that also means promoting an active dialogue. And I think that's part of what we want to have in this debate. This should be a really active dialogue of all the parties on something that's a very, very serious issue. So thank you very much. A big hand to the panel. Thank you.